Hey everybody, in this video we're going to talk about some of the options that you have for routing when mixing with a dangerous liaison. So if you're not already familiar with the liaison, click here to view the liaison overview video. It'll give you some of the basics and fundamentals of how it works and what it does. Once you're already familiar with that, what you need to know is that the liaison is a box that makes your life easier in the studio. It lets you route things without patching, it lets you save presets, etc. So what I want to talk about today is some of the options that you have for routing when mixing so that you can skip the learning curve and just go straight to making music. So first let's talk a little bit about the setup that I have here. So I've got a session in Pro Tools and I've got UA Apollo as my interface, and I'm going 16 channels out of the UA into my Dangerous 2-bus. Now from there, I'm taking my stereo out from the 2-bus, which is my stereo mix, and plugging it into bus A of the liaison. Now, if you're not working with analog summing, you can just take the stereo output of your interface and plug it into bus A of the liaison. That's the simplest form of routing that you can do in this setup. And what we'll do is we'll talk about the simplest way, and then eventually we'll get into some more complicated routing scenarios as we move on through the video. But the most basic thing you can do is just take your stereo mix and plug it into bus A of the liaison. Now, the liaison has two stereo buses, bus A and bus B. For right now, for the simplest form of routing, we're only going to plug into bus A. Then we take the stereo output from bus A and plug it back into our interface so that we can record our stereo mix after it's been sent through our outboard gear. Now, the other thing, which should be fairly obvious, but I should mention it anyway, is when using a liaison, you have to plug the insert sends and returns into your outboard gear so that you can use it. And then all you have to do is, once your stereo mix is going through bus A, simply press a button and that piece of gear is inserted on your stereo mix. So in this case, when I press 2, my purple compressor is inserted on my stereo mix. Now, like I said before, this is the simplest form of routing through the liaison, but it's also kind of boring, and there's a lot more things you can do with the liaison. So let's look at some slightly more complicated routing scenarios. One of the coolest things about the liaison is that it has a parallel processing loop. If you want to learn more about that, we made a whole video about it, so click here to check that out. So now, let's say you want to use parallel processing, and you also want to be able to have more control over the order of your outboard gear. With our last scenario, we only had so much control over the order of our gear. Let's say I've got my Moog engaged on 1 and my purple engaged on 2. If I want the purple before the Moog, I can flip it by hitting the flip button. So now I can instantly A/B Moog before compressor or compressor before Moog. But what happens if I want to hear insert 4 before insert 1? Not really possible in this current scenario. So let's reconfigure. If I take the output of bus A and plug it into the input of bus B, then I'm running both buses in series, and anything that I engage on bus A will always come before bus B, no matter what number it is on the insert. If that sounds confusing, that's okay. Let's take a look at a diagram. This might help clarify things. So if you look at this diagram, you see that bus A and bus B are two totally separate paths, even though they share the same inserts. So this lets you know that if you plug the output of A into the input of B, you're running in series, and anything that gets engaged on A will come before anything that gets engaged on B. Now, of course, you'll then have to take the output of bus B and plug that back into your interface to record your mix. So now, if I want my Shadow Hills compressor, let's say, to come before my Moog, I can insert the Shadow Hills on bus A and the Moog on bus B. This means that insert 4 on bus A comes before insert 1 on bus B, compressor before Moog. Pretty cool, right? Well, what if I want to hear it the other way around? I can quickly A/B that by storing this as a preset and then editing that preset to have the Moog come before the Shadow Hills. Now you'll notice when I do that, my preset light starts blinking. So what that means is if I hit this preset button, I can swap back and forth instantly between compressor before filter or filter before compressor, because the liaison remembers both my saved preset and my new signal path. So enough talking, let's actually play some music.
I got it all, no complaints. I understand this place. When I get home, will you be in like you do, like you do?
This is compressor before filter. This is filter before compressor. It's pretty cool, right? It's the only way you can ever do this instantly. Any other way, you'd have to rearrange your patch cables, or even in your DAW, you'd have to rearrange the order of your plugins, which takes a second. So with this, it's just a touch of a button.